game was effectively won in the first 16 minutes. Vish, what did you think of this affair? Because I suppose you could say it was a game of two halves, but Forest fairly comfortable in the end, you might say. Or you may not say.
Well, I think I will say.
Well,
yeah.
I'd love to. I should. I'm going to find out what you're going to say right now.
More for you. Yeah, it felt like the most anxious part of it all came at the very end when Richarlison got what turned out to be the consolation goal, and Forest were probably a little too deep than they needed to be. At the same time,
they do like it up them though, don't they?
Forest.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
As in they invite it up them.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
You know that, they don't like it up them. And like some teams actually don't mind it. Like when John Terry and Gary Cahill, they loved it up them, right? And Forest are totally fine with it up them.
Yeah, because there were various, there were various points when it felt like Spurs had options in the box, and they whip it in, and obviously Richarlison's goal comes from a cross out wide on the right, but so many of them were either being cut out at the first point of contact by the closing down defender, or they weren't really reaching their target in the box, and Forest seemed quite fine with it, even though the way the game was going and the way the atmosphere was building by the end of that game, Spurs felt like they were kind of onto something, that they were about to get something, or that something was going to break their way, and it didn't quite happen as early as it needed to, I suppose, for Spurs to really affect a comeback. But I suppose to go back to your framing the question, they got the business done early, and I suppose in many ways it was, it was a bit of a quintessential Forest performance as far as when they're not at their most fluent, but they get the job done efficiently.
Yeah, go ahead early and then sit on that lead and see it out. They're in third, a point ahead of Newcastle. It was a big win for Forest. It's mad to think that a year ago, I think it's a year ago today, they sent out that tweet from the official Nottingham Forest Twitter account about the VAR official being a Luton fan or something, and all that bollocks. You remember? Do you remember all that propaganda or whatever you want to call it that Marianakis was trying to pump out there, and everyone was just like, "Yeah, you're a well-storied, fine football club. Like you what you behaving like a Sunday League team for? So you fast forward a year, and here they are sitting third in the Premier League with just, 5 games to go or something like that in the league season, and Champions League qualification is very much in their grasp. A lot can happen, especially in football, in a year. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's quite the glow up, really, isn't it? It's a little bit like if you went to a student reunion 10 years later from your old school, and someone's dressed to the nines, you're like, didn't you used to stick pencils up your nose?
Yeah. And now look at now look at you.
You're the lad who ate the slug, didn't you? You're a CEO now. You used to eat slugs.
And now look at you. You're on the Football Ramble. Can it get any lower? We knew you'd end up on there. That behaviour.
You went to a fee-paying school. What are you doing on the Football Ramble? As Mum would often say.
I was going to say, it seems like a strange flex, that, but that's just family.
But no, I think you're right in what you said before about it being quite a big victory, because I think there was certainly a point maybe a couple of months ago where I kind of assumed Forest were Champions League, that had basically been sorted to my mind, and they could essentially cruise the rest of the season, basically doing what they do. And I suppose the issue then came about in the way that the teams behind them have rallied, and then they went on that run where they lose. I mean, it's not really a run, is it? Just 2 games. But
you're also forgetting it's Forest.
Yeah,
we can sort of say, well, Arsenal finished second. So Arsenal know what they're doing here. They know. I'd say they know how to finish second. That lot, right? So fair play to them. So they'll be fine. Oh yeah, Forest have been in the top 4 or 5 for ages now. They'll be fine. And Forest fans are a bit like, hang on, right? Yeah. That's very kind of you.
You don't see the tweet from last year. You don't see that.
This isn't us. All right. We hope it becomes us, but this isn't us. But that's how good and steady they've been.
Yeah, but then obviously they lose. As I was saying, they lose to Aston Villa. They then lose at home to Everton. And it feels like particularly the Everton game that
Mm.
Everton did a bit of a number on
Well, they
them,
did.
really.
I mean, anyone can lose to Moyes' Everton, though, to be fair.
No, that is a very fair point. But with this win, they get back third, especially playing last on this weekend, where the teams beneath them, aside from Newcastle, end up getting 3 points, and so the pressure's back on them, and they responded well. And even today during the game, I thought you've got Spurs 2-0 down at home in front of a fan base who are kind of fed up with the fact that they've been trying to tank in the league for the benefit of midweek European excursions. Could they have been a bit more ruthless? But I suppose they did get the job done. So who am I to say otherwise?
Yeah, well, it was a perfect start for them. I mean, Anderson crashes one in after 5 minutes. One might say the keeper could have done better, but from a neutral point of view, it was quite an enjoyable hit, that, as it sort of skidded and flew into the net. And again, after, as you say, Forest going into this game having lost the last 2 games, we can joke about saying, well, it is Spurs, but scoring after 5 minutes, then they have the disallowed goal, and then Chrissy Wood just gets back into the routine of things. It was just perfect for Forest. It settles any nerves. It's kind of all right. Here we go. We're back on the wagon here, boys, and they played it very, very well indeed. I mean, they looked far more likely than Tottenham did in those early stages, as the 2 goals testify to as well. And it is good to see Chris Wood back among the goals. He's had such a great season. Obviously, they've got that injury and international break and so on. The last thing you would want is for him to, in particular, to peter out as well. So good to see him scoring.
Yeah, no, definitely. He had that one disallowed. I mean, he was offside, obviously, but it was a lovely header. Again, helped by Vicario coming out and doing what he does. Weirdly, I didn't think Spurs were that bad after they went 2-0 down, and I get the quandary there.
Yeah.
But I thought there was a level of persistence there, which I was, is impressed too strong a word? For want of a better one, I was impressed by it. I mean, I think they
looked and felt a bit more positive, perhaps.
It did. A lot of that was from Mathis Tell.
Yeah.
Like he had a very good game. Yep. But yeah, I suppose it's part of playing Forest, isn't it? They're going to invite you onto them, and they're going to let you do what you need to do in front of the box and prevent you from doing it inside the box. But yeah, it's hard to really think of too many great chances beyond the brilliant save from Matt Sells to Richarlison before he gets his goal. But yeah, they just lacked a bit of craft. But the fact that they make the twin substitutions at half time to take off Romero and Van der Ven to bring on Danso and Davies, that obviously spoke to what they're preparing for going forward. But by and large, of all the Spurs, of all the home Spurs defeats this season, this wasn't one of the worst.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It is a funny situation, because what do you think if you're a fan of Spurs at the stadium? Because you have to have, I mean, as you said, at half time, you can see what he's doing, taking off those 2 defenders, and you can kind of go, well, okay, bigger picture and so on. But then you kind of think, this is an arse of a stadium to get to. I've paid good money to be here. You're essentially just going, yeah, it doesn't matter what happens. Because really, other than a few quid in terms of the placing in the Premier League, which I don't think is anything to be sniffed at, but really there isn't really anything to play for. The thing that could save their season is the Europa League, and they have a winnable tie in the semi-final in the Europa League. So it's a funny old situation there. I grant you that they did show a bit of something, and on another day maybe they get a bit lucky and get back in the game. And as you say, Sells makes a great save, and oh my goodness, what about Harry Toffolo's clearance off the line?
Yeah,
I mean, my goodness, that was different class from that Kulusevski header. Am I saying that right? Toffolo, by the way, was that the commentators?
Yeah, that's how they pronounced it.
Yeah,
and they're always right. So.
Well, indeed they are. Apart from with Awoniyi, I know what you mean. You want to kind of be critical of Spurs, because that just seems to be the way in the Premier League this season. And yet, there did seem to be like a little something, but ultimately they've lost the game and didn't ever well, they were never going to win it, I suppose. But this is this season's Spurs under Ange Postecoglou, I suppose. I mean, he'll go through, we're recording this straight after the full-time whistle, so we haven't seen the post-match. But he'll go through the motions with that again and blah, 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 blah. But now they do have something to play for in the Europa League. I mean, they always did, of course. But that is like, there is a genuine chance to actually end this season on an enormous positive, a very, very unlikely positive. So that is informing pretty much every decision Postecoglou is making.
Yeah, it is. And I think the one thing that might be of some comfort, the silver lining, as it were, would be that Spurs didn't just mail this performance in tonight. But yeah, I totally get you, because obviously Manchester United are in a similar situation. There's that almost kind of acceptable tanking of where they are, with a view to preserving themselves for the Europa League semi-finals, and it comes at a cost to the fans, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I appreciate if you're it's a bit of a catch-22 situation, because if you are a fan, you want the best for your team, and therefore this is the best for your team. At the same time, you pay a lot of money for the ticket, for getting to your ground, for and it is a cost. I know it's a great joy watching your own team, but it does come at a cost.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of it is a really peculiar one, especially if you end up empty-handed at the end of the season.
Oh yeah,
because I mean it's just it's such a gamble, and knowing I suppose we're veering a bit from the game and maybe giving Forest a bit more credit here, but in this country we know at least one of those teams will be empty-handed at the end of the season. And you're not sure if either of them can really cope with it, both financially, emotionally, just on a kind of on a morale level, but also just in the banter stakes. Not that it matters, but there is so much at risk here.
Yeah, there is, and
it's like a ridiculous bordering on university experiment here. It's Mentos in a Coke bowl. It's kind of chucking a bowling ball off the 10th story of a building and trying to get it through a safe. Like it's so absurd.
I'm unfamiliar with that one, but I'd like to see it.
My YouTube algorithms.
Is that what it is?
I'll blame them for that analogy, but yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah.
And to be fair, like maybe we should give Forest a bit more credit for that, because at no point do they get sucked into.
No,
it.
That's true.
They just thought, look, we're just gonna come and go, and we'll see you later and do what we're gonna do. We're gonna get into the Champions League the normal way.
Exactly. Yeah,
we're gonna get in through the front door.
Yeah, the honest way. I was pleased for Richarlison when he scored, because he'd obviously had a couple of efforts. Sells makes a great save, and he was really trying his heart out there. I mean, desperate to start, of course, for Spurs, and I thought he kind of took his chance, if you see what I mean. I think Solanke's a better forward, obviously, and a better fit, certainly in this Spurs side. In fact, I would say most teams, they were flying in a lot of crosses into Richarlison. He's pretty handy in the air, and so for him to finally get one, I was quite pleased to see that. And there are some other players there who've got something to prove. So again, I didn't think there was any lack of effort or anything like that. The energy levels were high, but as you say, trying to get through this Forest side is quite difficult. And yeah, you're right. Forest again showed that kind of street smart, if you like, with Captain Ryan Yates involved. Of course, several listeners submitted him for their Mount Rushmore of football shithouses after we gave ours on the mailbag on Saturday. And I think, yeah, it's certainly a more recent one, but he certainly fits the bill with regard to that. Speaking of which, at the start of the second half, there was a sort of a handful of minutes where VAR was briefly out of service due to a fire alarm at the VAR hub in Stockley Park. And I thought to myself, it could have been like the Purge. You've just got a few minutes, like off the ball incidents flying in, referee not seeing any of it. What would have happened? Would they have retrospectively gone back to VAR? You know what I mean? Like 10 minutes into the second half, they'd have been like, right, you need to go to the monitor. You're going to need to watch about 3 or 4 minutes of just footage because of what was going on. And then who set the fire alarm off at Stockley Park? There could have been, oh my goodness, the conspiracy theories would have been flying around the place, Vish. But sadly, nothing happened and we didn't have any of that.
You make it sound like, the feed goes off at Stockley Park, or rather they leave the room and then by the time they get back there, the pitch is just a crater. Like Baines just pressed the button and the pitch is collapsing on itself. Like, what's happened here? We can't even rewind.
Can't do it
because the ball's gone out of play. We can't go back to it. The ball's gone out of play and restarted. Yeah.
What are you going to do?
If we condense it to those first 16 minutes, it was a very solid. I want to say a smash and grab because of the nature of how they got their goals, but it was almost like right. Here's 20 minutes to do your business. Here's our non-VAR window almost. Like let's get it done. Let's get something to hold and we'll do that. And I think in those, in that period in particular, Elliot Anderson, who obviously gets the goal, he was everywhere, wasn't he? And he was almost benefiting from the fact that they've got this one midfielder who sprays passes around, loves driving with the ball, is everywhere. We're going to be fucked if they have two. And Elliot Anderson thought, well, I'll be that second one. Yeah. And he really put himself about, and he was so impressive. And they were even in that short window, they were already talking about, well, Thomas Tuchel's got to be watching this, surely. And it was that kind of performance, really. It was really impressive. And then it just kind of it put enough notice on Spurs centre midfield that it took a while for them to play back through the middle again. And it almost, even after that 20-minute period, it bought Forest a bit more time where they knew everything was just going to come down the channels for a bit. So they just had to, I suppose, keep alert out wide.
And and you saw the scenes in the away end when the final whistle went. They were delighted with this, trying to head every ball and go into every tackle. Because again, this would be so important. I think that if Forest were, say, to finish in the Europa League spots, for example, it would still be a huge achievement. Wherever they finish this season has been brilliant. But the fact that they've had a hand on the Champions League spots for so long, one could be forgiven for thinking, that's a little bit of a shame if they never got over the line. So there's still so much to play for. But of course, their next game is against Manchester City on Sunday in the FA Cup semi-final. So getting a Champions League spot is huge. We saw that with Aston Villa last season, and you see their run, and Forest fans are thinking, well, why not us next season? But there's a little matter of actual silverware up for grabs as well. So, I mean, it could be quite the season. As I say, whatever happens, it's been a great season for Nottingham Forest. It's come out of nowhere, really, you might argue, but so much still to play for.
Yeah, and I think we need to make this crystal clear because, it's a phrase I think I used on Monday's Ramble when talking about Bournemouth. Yeah. But, we always say that if you'd offered, Team X's fans this, and this, or, this and this at the start of the season, they would have, ripped your hand off for it. And there is a temptation to say that about Forest, but also, as you say, because they've had the Champions League spot for so long, and now they're in the FA Cup semi-final, why can't they have it all?
Yeah. Well, context...
Why can't they be thinking, you know what, get Champions League, and fuck it, imagine, we're already going to have one day out at Wembley. Imagine a second one.
Yeah, totally.
Imagine what we could do with a second day out at Wembley.
Yeah, absolutely. But, the context changes, right?
Yeah, of course, of course. If you'd offered them at the start of the season, they would have bitten your hand off. If you offered Europa League to them last week, they would have slapped you in the face.
Exactly, yeah. This is it. This is absolutely it.